We're live?
Yep.
Yes, cool. Awesome. Hello and welcome to all our viewers wherever you may be. My name is Muhammad Abu Ghazala.
And I'm Bassam Haddad.
And we're both so excited to be your co-hosts for episode 11 of season 2 of Live with ASI, a month of knowledge production. As you can see, I am not MK Smith because she is not here today.
And because of your beard.
Yes.
We have a great show for you lined up today, and we apologize for the not brief actually, it's a bit of a delay, but we will start right away, and here we go. We have a great show again lined up today with Jadaliya's Environment Page's second anniversary, a panel on lessons from sanctions on Iran and Iraq, sectarianism in Syria since the 2011 uprising, and an episode of the Search Files podcast. Also, a new issue of Status Al-Wada, which just came out and it's remarkable. More episodes of Connections podcast, a partners feature, and a must-read recommendation.
And of course, engaging conversations with Navid Mansouri, Paula Messina, Basilia Zeno, Mu'in Rabbani, Bridget Garasi, and Alan Gresh. As always, all content discussed on the show today will be available in the accompanying episode digest to be published on Jadaliya later this week, so keep your eyes peeled for that.
So sit back, relax, and let's get to it, Muhammad.
Awesome. Up first, Status Al-Wada issue 9.1 is live. This issue of the audiovisual journal contains over 35 entertaining and thought-provoking interviews with more than 50 guests, including activists, students, researchers, musicians, poets, and journalists and authors.
Some highlights of this issue include a panel discussion about Mesa's vote to endorse BDS and several Arabic language interviews focused on topics related to poetry, music, and literature.
To get a closer look into this issue, we have Status producer Paula Messina joining us live now.
Hi, Paula.
Hi, Mohammed.
Hello.
Hi, Bassam.
Hi.
Good to see you again, Paula.
Good to see you both. Great to be here to highlight some of the great content we have in this issue and to talk about the future a little bit.
Absolutely.
So I guess one of the interviews I was really excited about was a conversation with an Emmy Award-winning writer and producer, Neda Tolui-Semnani, about her book called They Said They Wanted Revolution, a memoir of my parents, which is about her family story before and after the Iranian Revolution. And this conversation is brought by one of our partners, VOMINA, Voices of the Middle East and North Africa, out of KPFA in California. So that's right up top there on our website, and a very exciting, interesting conversation with the author. But always we have some also great content produced internally by our Status hosts. And I wanted to highlight definitely Kati El-Hayek's conversation with Raya El-Zain about, that's actually Mohammed Ali Nail's conversation with Raya El-Zain about the figure of the Arab rapper in neoliberal Orientalist figurations and U.S. foreign policy, known as rap diplomacy. So that's great. And then Kati El-Hayek brings a conversation with Farah Hatoui in relation to questions of migration, solidarity, and decolonizing creative processes and practices, which is really interesting. Farah is at McGill University in Canada right now, and also associated with some really interesting, cool screening collectives in Canada centered on Syrian and Palestinian stories. Other than that, we also have a really great, the latest episode of Security in Context with guests such as Mu'in Rabbani, Noura Erakat, Lina Mirwani, and Yara Khawari. And they're speaking about the Palestinian struggle for liberation from the perspective of solidarity movements. And definitely last but not least, we have MK Smith, who is not here today, but is definitely featured on Status in a conversation with one of our hosts, Rachad Al-Makhlouf, who is a Syrian actress. And they're engaged in a very a very interesting conversation about professional and personal experiences that Rahed had after the revolution of 2011 in Syria. So we have a really, like as you mentioned, some of the highlights, very eclectic mix of topics, and so I just wanted to highlight these, but also let everyone know that we're also already working on our summer issue 9.2, and that should be coming sometime in early June.
You're on.
We're on. Okay, sorry, we were muted. Thank you so much for breaking that down for us, Paula. Is Status working on anything? Is there anything in the works you want to share with us today?
Yeah, I think we're, like I said, we're in the midst of publishing our next issue, so 9.2, which would come out in the summer. But in the interim, kind of between now and then, we have released this interview with Neda Semnani, for instance, and some new KPFA content is on the way. And I just wanted to let everyone know that you can listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We publish episodes twice a week, so that's Mondays and Thursday mornings, regularly every week. So if you don't have a chance to visit our website, you can definitely just subscribe on those platforms and, get the latest episodes on your phone or wherever.
Thanks for letting us know that, Paula.
Thank you, Paula. And I hope we can continue doing what we have been doing at Status and expanding. I understand that we are also going to be working with a number of other partners coming in, and we have a lot in store for the fall, of course. But first, let's hear from you whether you have anything to share with us about the Arabic content. I know that you and I have worked on it with others, and we're planning to increase Arabic content.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of our main goals right now. With every issue we publish, we're reaching out to partners who have contributed in the past, but also trying to make new partnerships to increase our Arabic content. And I mean, Mohammed Ali Nail is a really good example of that. He was with us early on, before I was even a part of the Status team. And after a few years, now he's back and producing a lot of content on the theme of music in Arabic. So that's just one example, but that's definitely something we're working on, and that's important to us. So
thank you so much, Paula, and we will have you back soon, I hope.
Hope so. Good
Have a good day, Paula.
Take care.
Take care.
Okay, and last month, ASI co-sponsored an event with George Mason University's Middle East and Islamic Studies program titled The Making of Sects, Boundary Making and the Sectarianization of the Syrian Uprising 2011 to 2013.
In this event, Basilius Zeno, who is the Karl Lowenstein Fellow and visiting lecturer in political science at Amherst College, discussed the main factors that contributed to the increasing visibility of sectarian frameworks and the sidelining of non-sectarian actors in the context of the Syrian uprising and the subsequent war.
And we're lucky to have Basil with us now to tell us more about his...
Except that he is not with us yet.
Oh, he is... He must be still connecting.
Yeah.
Hope we can get him in a second.
Should we skip over to Alain?
For now, I think so, yeah.
Let me see if Alain's with us. Alain, are you with us?
For now, we'll get back to Basil. We for sure want to hear. Alain, can you hear us?
Alain, are you with us? Alain? We can hear you, but we cannot see you. Alain? Alain? Are you with us? Okay, let's go to...
We should go to the next segment anyway.
Bennett, can we message Alain and let him know that we're ready for him?
Sure. There's a delay in the audio, by the way.
Yeah. One moment. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, on our last show, we discussed a curated exhibit titled Geographies of the Future, Traveling the Arab Majority World in Virtual Reality, which experiments with virtual media to render experiments with virtual media to render possible impossible worlds.
A few weeks ago, the Middle East and Islamic Studies program at GMU held a follow-up panel with the artists participating in this exhibit, where they discussed what it was like to reimagine geographies of the Arab world, of the Arab majority world, in order to analyze political violence or to chart.
You okay?
No, because chart a new known landscapes. Is it a new or a new?
To chart anew, like charting
a new
like pioneers,
known landscapes.
Sailors, I don't know, stuff like that. Earlier today, I spoke with Bridget Garasi, who was one of the co-moderators of this panel. Let's see what she had to say.
All right, here we go. We are going to play the video.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to have with me today environmental anthropologist Bridget Garasi, who is assistant professor of anthropology at Franklin and Marshall College, and whose work examines how war and conflict create ecological life in the Arab majority world. She's also a co-curator of the virtual media exhibit, Geographies of the Future, Traveling the Arab Majority World and Virtual Reality. Bridget, thanks for joining us today. If you could tell us a little bit about what it was like working with these artists in creating this exhibit, and if you have, maybe you could share a little bit about what you hope the exhibit would accomplish.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for the opportunity to speak to you again today. We had a wonderful event with ASI a couple of weeks ago, which I believe people can access a full artist chat about the exhibit. And so I will say one of the greatest things about working on the exhibit is being in conversation with these marvelously talented artists who are really contributing so much to new work to the Geographies of the Future exhibit. In terms of working with the artists, my work is based in Iraq primarily, and I have to say I've really enjoyed working with Ala Yunus and Aliyas, because they consistently push me in my own approach to thinking about war, and particularly the intimate registers of how people experience the impact of the ecological impact of war. Allah's piece is a realization of political ambition in three stories along Haifa Street in Baghdad, beginning on the eve of the Iran-Iraq War and continuing through the US invasion, and then the real estate developers' reappropriation of that space for a rising multinational class entering Iraq today. And from that piece, Allah is so good at capturing the registers of violence in small, mundane activities like the whistle of a tea kettle. And so that really pushes me in my own work to think about how to do the same when I'm thinking about marshes in the middle of wartime transformation. We're also, Jessica and I, looking forward to, over the next year, working more closely with the artists to imagine what the exhibit can be, but also to think about possible ways of staging virtual works online in a space that will live on and that is related to the exhibit. So I'm really excited about the opportunities for more collaboration with them. In terms of what I hope the exhibit will accomplish, that's such a big question, but it's such a good question and an important one. One of the things that really came out of the meeting, the conversation we had with the artists, was how violent virtual media has been and can be, particularly in the Arab majority world. And, from video gaming technologies to drone warfare to the Corona Atlas program, just even in terms of archaeological surveillance. So I think one of the key tools for all of us is to think about, okay, what's the potential of this technology? Is there potential? Can we move past a Facebook Meta kind of approach to virtual media? Can we move past the metaverse and think about what are the ethical obligations of artists and also scholars in a virtual space? How do we connect the work that we're doing in this virtual realm to projects that artists have ongoing. For example, I know Majd al-Shahabi and Ahmed Barkley with Palestine Open Maps have held several workshops in Lebanon and with in Palestinian refugee camps and around the world on open source coding. And these are some of the initiatives that I think we could push a little bit farther in our collaboration. And I hope that we're able to start a conversation among the ASI community, but also be part of the greater conversation that's happening right now in academia and in artistic production about what is both the potential, the dangers, and the ethics of working in virtual media.
Sounds really great, Bridget.
Yeah, go ahead.
You do that again. Okay.
I couldn't hear.
Okay, yeah, that's our fault. Muted. We're jumping back. We are trying to talk to Basil really quick about his recent panel with GMU MIA's program about sectarianism in Syria since 2011. Basil, thank you so much for joining us today. Really quick, can you discuss some of the factors that facilitated the increasing visibility in sectarianism in Syria since 2011?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, the article is extensive and long and capture. In this article, in particular, I trace the discursive rearticulation of the sectarian narrative as a part of the meaning-making processes in the context of the Syrian uprising during the first 3 years of the uprising between 2011 and 2013, which was in the context of the Arab Spring in particular. So my aim in particular was to investigate and explore not only the role of authoritarian regimes, in this case the Syrian regime or the Assad regime, and supra-local actors, which means sectarian entrepreneurs, regional actors like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar, and other countries, in producing sectarianizing conditions, but also that of the role of local instigators, which requires actually viewing actors dynamically and agency as a shifting set of possibility, as the late political scientist Leanne Fuji encourages us to see. So the aim of this article, it focuses on the gradual and chronological evolution of the sectarian narrative. And in the light, I think it's helpful, especially in the light of the revealed massacre, the Tadamun massacre a few days ago, which has been instrumentalized and used as a way to impose a sectarian narrative once again. So in contrast, I argue that the increasing visibility of sectarian frameworks and the demobilization of non-sectarian actors were parts of boundary-making strategies pursued by local and supra-local actors who capitalize on regime violence and regional sectarian framing and sought to have a monopoly over the symbolic representation of the uprising.
Thank you very much, Basil. We actually had a great conversation with you, and I was moderating, and the questions were pretty good, and your answers were excellent. So we're very happy that you were able to join us. At this point, we wish you the best in your future research. I know what you're working on. It's very exciting, and we look forward to reading it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely,
It's
anytime.
our total pleasure,
Ahlan wa
Basil.
sahlan.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Ahlan.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, now we move into this month's Partners feature. And for this month's Partner feature, we're excited to highlight our productive transnational partnership with Orient 21 and its publication director, Alain Gresh.
Orient 21 brings together journalists, academics, and social activists to produce incisive, undistorted analysis and commentary on the Middle East and North Africa, and no one other than Alain Gresh can do this in a superb manner.
That's why we're so excited and so very glad to have Alain Gresh, the founder and director of Orient 21, with us today.
Alain,
Thank you
كيفك؟
very much.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Alain, how should we understand the results of the recent French elections? We are all very thirsty to hear what you have to say.
There are many lessons from this election. As you know, I mean, the presidential election is the most important in France. And the result has been very, not strange, but very interesting in any case. First, I mean, the most important thing perhaps is the fact that for the first time we have three ultra-right candidates, including Marine Le Pen, who got together more than 30% of the votes. And this is, for the first time, I don't think at any other moment of the history, we have the extreme right so strong in France. The second lesson was that at the second round, as you know, there was Emmanuel Macron, who won the second round, and Marine Le Pen. But just after Marine Le Pen, and this was something important, you had Jean-Luc Mélenchon, head of La France Insoumise, a left-wing, very left-wing organization who got more or less 20%. And this has created a new situation. The left went at this election very divided. They have five candidates, and they were insulting each other, and they were not able to make anything together. But now we will have, after this presidential election, parliamentary election. Normally, when a president wins presidential election, his candidates win the election at the parliament. But now, since 2 days, we have very strong discussion between the left-wing organization to have common candidates in every part of France. There was an agreement between La France Insoumise and the Green Party, and there are discussions between La France Insoumise and the Communist Party, and La France Insoumise and the Socialist Party, or at least a part of the Socialist Party, who is quite divided. This can create a new situation because Macron won the presidential election with 60% of the vote against Marine Le Pen, but many people voted mostly against the extreme right. And many people are unhappy of his victory. So we can have a very, very new situation in which the left wing, if they are united, win the election in the parliament, which will create a very special situation, which we call cohabitation, with a prime minister coming from the left and Macron as president. But in any case, it has created some hope, especially after this result of the extreme right, which was really very depressing.
Thank you, Ala. This is a wonderful insight into what's going on. A lot of us basically know the results, but we really appreciate your addressing of the details. Is there anything that we should look forward to in the future that has to do with the effect of this election on what is happening in Europe in terms of elections and beyond?
Of course, I mean, if there is a victory of the left, it will be positive not only for France, but also for the all Europe. Especially this time, we have a really left-wing party. I mean, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is presenting a very, very strong political program, social program, increasing the salaries, taking some liberties about the economic rules of European Union, and also a very clear anti-racist and anti-Islamophobic position. So this can be very positive, I think, and it can have consequence and create a kind of dynamics, especially after, I mean, really years of depression for the left in France. And also to add something, I mean, we must say that Jean-Luc Mélenchon has been one of the most clear political leaders on the Palestinian question, which is very important also, especially since now for many years, French position has been getting more and more pro-Israeli.
Oh yes, and we are very appreciative of all of the exchanges that we do. We know that you publish a lot of remarkable material and you translate it, and we usually make selections and repost. So we appreciate that very much. And I think we just reposted an interview with you, and it's actually well circulated. Thank you, Alan, for being a solid partner of the Arab Studies Institute and Jadaliya in particular. And we hope to always connect with you. And I hope to see you soon in France.
Okay, thank you very much.
Shukran.
Thank you, Alan.
Salam.
See you.
Salam.
Okay, up next, we are skipping a little bit forward to talk about the ever impressive Mouin Rabbani, who has released 2 new episodes of the Connections podcast last month, where he discussed with expert guests the matters of protecting cultural heritage and the struggle for human rights in the Middle East.
Ahlan
Hi
Mu'in.
guys, Bassam, Muhammad.
Ahlan Fik Mouin, thanks so much for making time to talk to us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your conversations on protecting cultural heritage and human rights last month?
Sure, it was actually 3 episodes. The first, as you mentioned, was an interview with Hernar Wattenpaw, the University of California, about the protection of cultural heritage. And we discussed why the targeting and attempts to eliminate cultural heritage are increasingly part and parcel of armed conflict, particularly in the Middle East, and the various motives behind this. And we also discussed the growing efforts to embed the protection of cultural heritage, as well as to hold those who attack cultural heritage accountable under international law. After that, I spoke with Sarah Lee Whitson, the executive director of Democracy for the Arab World Now, DAWN, and we spoke about the human rights situation in the Middle East generally, and then also looking at the impact of the war in Ukraine also on U.S. relations, particularly with the Gulf states from a human rights angle. And given the origins of this organization, we also spoke about recent developments in the Jamal Khashoggi murder case and what appears to be Turkey sacrificing the prosecution of Khashoggi's murderers in order to improve its relations with Saudi Arabia. And most recently, last week, I spoke with Martin Konechny, the founder and director of the EU Middle East project, about the perennially contrived controversy concerning the Palestinian national curriculum and Palestinian textbooks, in which we discussed kind of the various dimensions of this issue. And he also emphasized the need for Palestinians themselves to work more proactively to conduct their own research in order to seek to put this issue to rest and focus on the issues in Palestine that genuinely matter.
Breaking that down, can you give us a sneak peek for what's coming up for Connections in the coming weeks or months?
Yes, we have 2 episodes planned in the coming weeks. The first is with a guest who I've previously had on the show, Nabi Boulos, the Middle East editor of the Los Angeles Times. And we'll be speaking to him because he's spent quite a bit of time in Ukraine in recent months. He was there when the Russian invasion started. He then went back recently and has just left. And we'll be talking with him about his impressions, as well as about the fallout of this conflict on the Middle East. And then the week after, on the 17th, I'll be interviewing Ian Martin, who has had a long career in the United Nations, serving in various capacities in Gaza, in East Timor, in Haiti. But most importantly, I'll be discussing with him the subject of his new book, All Necessary Measures, which is about the origins of the Libya conflict, because Ian Martin was the first UN special representative in Libya. and basically established that UN mission. So that I'm sure will also be a very interesting discussion on the 17th of May.
And we are happy to say that we are happy and excited that the Connections podcast is now on Spotify, and
That's
it is
right.
being yes, it is being listened to, and it, of course, it's already on the status as well as Apple, iTunes podcasts. So we are very happy for this podcast to be a dominant podcast. You have more than 40 episodes.
35, I believe.
35?
Yes.
Okay, then
Even better.
Heading
Bennett,
towards
I thought
40, indeed.
we have 35 of connections. I thought we had 40. Okay, well. Let's.
We're moving towards there.
Okay,
The goalpost.
we're getting there. We're getting there.
Right.
Okay, so we're waiting for Naveed to join in. Let me see. There he is. Okay, Mu'in, we are always very excited to speak with you, and we hope to speak with you soon again. And perhaps I'll see you sometime in Europe or here.
Likewise. Thanks, Bassam and Mohammed. Good talk.
Let's see you, Mu'in. Good to see you as usual.
Bye.
Take care. All right.
All right, 1 second. We will be moving to. Okay, last month, Jadaliya and ASI put on a panel last month titled "The Political Ethics of Sanctions." In the wake of sanctions placed on Russia in retaliation for its invasion of Ukraine, the panelists looked to the cases of Iraq and Iran for lessons on the history and impacts of Western sanctions. Their discussion addresses the common assertion that sanctions are a peaceful alternative to warfare and interrogate what it even means to say that sanctions work.
And we have with us our event co-host, one of our events co-hosts and co-editor of Jadaliya's Iran page, Naveed Mansouri, to fill us in. Hi, Naveed.
Hello.
Welcome nice to see you, Naveed. Welcome to Live with ASI.
Thank you. So should I provide a little recap of the interview?
That would be great. It was a remarkable interview, very well attended, and I actually used some of it in a talk that I gave, including some of the clips, the video clips by the guests you had, and the conversation was very rich. So if people missed it, they should look at the digest in order to find it when the digest will be published in a couple of days on Jadaliya.
Yeah, you should absolutely check it out. It was we had both two doctors, Orezu Osonu, who is a professor in the Department of Law, Societies, and Justice at the University of Washington, and director of its Middle East Center. And she's also written forgiveness work, mercy, law, and victims' rights in Iran, and the politics of women's rights in Iran. And the second person we had was Dr. Yusuf Baker, who's a professor of international studies in the International Studies Department at CSU Long Beach, and also the co-director of the Middle East Studies program there. And he's also co-director of the Iraqi Narratives Project. They both have expertise on Iran and Iraq, respectively. And so we were basically asking them to bring the insights that they have from their expertise in those contexts to provide some insight onto the sanctions that the U.S. is and Western powers are imposing on Russia in the wake of its war on Ukraine. And so the general we asked a few questions. One's about history. So what are the history of sanctions ideologically? What can give some insights into the sort of like what they do rhetorically and discursively, and also the big question of how do they work, and what does it mean to even ask that question? And it was really interesting. So Professor Osanu had framed it in the context of the world wars, that basically after World War I, liberal internationalists like Woodrow Wilson and the sort of during the time of the formation of the League of Nations had sanctions in mind as part of an array of instruments for the creation of sovereign nations. But of course, this was sort of, as we know with Wilson and his problematic politics, this was sort of mediated and shaped by a particular kind of racial geography. And so, but what's interesting too was that up until very recent history, like after the Cold War, sanctions weren't used that often. They were used in 2 cases on Rhodesia and South Africa, but it's only recently that the U.S. has come to use them frequently. And that's like ideologically and logistically to the reason sanctions work has a lot to do, or this is what Professor Baker was saying, was that they have a lot to do with a highly integrated economy. That's something that's quite contemporary. That there aren't these separate markets that are somewhat indifferent to one another, but that there is something like a global system. And ideologically, in terms of sort of liberalism, that's just like liberalism. It's a disavowal that you have something like, you can basically impose sanctions. Sanctions can do all of the things that war does, immiserate people, but then the people imposing them can say, oh, but it's not war. So it's a kind of way of a mode of disavowal. And also in terms of the respective contexts, so for example, with Iraq and Iran, one of the sort of the question of what do they do rather than do they work is, well, what Baker was saying was, Yusuf was saying was, in the case of Iraq, we should see it as basically a continuation of war by other means. That basically, since the Iran-Iraq war in 1980, the U.S. was pitting these two powers against each other, devastating Iraq's economy, and basically from that period through to the Gulf War and the second Gulf War, that we should understand sanctions within this longer history of the U.S. basically being invested in crushing Iraq's economy, of making it just weak enough. Or just so weak that it can't actually do anything, but just strong enough to keep Iran at bay. And in terms of Iran too, what we see something kind of very similar, that it adheres to the kind of ideological things that Baker was talking about, of disavowal. That it's something where Osanu was saying that, and this was interesting to me, I hadn't actually considered it, that there is no legal body to adjudicate whether or not sanctions are being used correctly, and the suspending disbelief about what that means. But even within its own terms, there's no legal body. There are no consequences for sanctioning parties. There's no one to say anything about or to sort of respond if they're being used in ways that, even for like the good liberal, seem to make them seem sort of off color or whatever. And so that was like very insightful. So if you watch the interview, you get this very rich history of sanctions, both in a global history and within these two contexts that provide a lot of information and insight about their effects and consequences. Of course, the big question is, do they work? That's what everybody wants to know. What Osanu was saying is that the question, do they work, is not well formulated, because part of the history of sanctions is that the objective is always left obscure. And if you actually want to see what they do, you have to look at who they benefit. You have to look at and their consequences. That's really where the meaning, like the sort of wealth of information resides, in terms of their consequences. And it seems that it seems that in terms of the question of like regime change, well, it doesn't, unless what Osanu was saying was that, well, unless there are mechanisms in place for people to be able to sort of utilize in order to be able to affect transformations in their context, well, if those aren't there, then there's no way in which a response by the sort of specter of an unhappy population who wants to revolt can actually do anything anyway. And more practically and empirically, what Baker was saying in Iraq was that sanctions actually had the effect of both prompting the Iraqi state to centralize, and also creating multiple nodes of power anyway. And that this was actually sort of part of a strategy that we should take seriously, as not something that, to see past the rhetoric of, oh, we want to like provide democracy or spread democracy or whatever, that there was actually a way in which the point is the destabilization, because the destabilization provides a opportunity for the exploitation of this kind of chaotic circumstance. And so And so with it, and what Osanu was also saying was that, in sort of tandem with that, was that since like for the whole 20th century, beginning with the liberal internationalists, sanctions effectively are a way for liberal internationalists to preserve power. And within the sort of chaos that they sow of restructuring things, like within the contemporary history of neoliberal restructuring, to restructuring the circumstance in a way that benefits them, yeah. And so that's sort of the overarching, I think, narrative and insights that you can sort of get more information on within that interview. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Naveed, for taking the time to explain all this to us. I can't recommend this panel enough. It's so insightful, and there's so much to be gleaned from. You can find it in the digest, of course, to the audience.
Absolutely. And Naveed, are there any other interesting events, panels, articles, podcasts? I know that there's something cooking in the Iran page.
Right now, we're in a an interim phase. We're sort of restructuring the page, but I think that we're sort of we're restructuring the page. So, but like keep your eyes out on Twitter and Facebook and whatnot, and we have
And we will. I know that we are working also to expand the podcast feature because even though, of course, text is the mainstay of Jadaliyya and ASI in general, but we are trying to have these conversations, especially at a time when everybody's so backed up and busy. We usually are able to get a podcast, not always an article, during such times. So we hope that we continue to read this remarkable material on the Iran page on Jadaliyya, and hope to see you again, Naveed, here on LWA.
Yes, thank you for having me.
See you soon, Naveed.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Up next, we are delighted to share that Jadaliyya's environment page is now 2 years old. Launched on Earth Day in 2020 with a bouquet of stories and a mission statement.
Did it work?
It
Did
worked.
the sound effect work?
Yeah, claps. Yay. We all got it. I got it. I heard it.
Bennett, you heard it?
Yeah.
It was cool, right?
Yeah, it was a really nice touch. I think it adds liveliness.
Eid Mubarak.
Eid Mubarak is what it is. Launched on Earth Day in 2020 with a bouquet of stories and a mission statement, clap, clap, that emphasized the need for critical perspectives, which did not, I'm sorry, technical difficulties, which did not treat the environment as an apolitical question. The environment page has been working diligently since then to provide readers with critically engaged resources on the various dimensions of the environmental question in the region.
Over the past year, the page, the environment page, has published 17 stories, both written work and podcasts in both English and Arabic, focusing on themes of race and the environment, climate change and disasters, scarcity narratives, the built environment, and environmental knowledge production. And
you can find the celebratory post in the digest, as always, with all the other content we have.
And this will be published pretty soon, depending on how fast Bennett moves forward with the editing. And
later this week.
I'm assuming later this week, yes.
As usual.
Must-reads. We'll end today's show with a must-read recommendation.
This article by Roxanne Panchasi is titled An Atomic Adventure and Empire, Algeria, April 1961. The article describes the history of the last atomic detonation in a series of the French bomb experiments in Algeria after World War II. The stories that have been told about the bomb testing have highlighted it as a chapter in French technological history. But this article speaks to how the nuclear imperial campaign left a painful legacy for Algerians.
And
actually, there's one more thing that we skipped over.
Yes, let's do it.
Search files.
Let's do it.
1 second. Let's get up here.
Absolutely.
Okay, and there is a brand new episode of the Search Files podcast available. For those that don't already know, Search Files covers trends in knowledge production and pedagogy in the Middle East and North Africa, based on a constantly evolving dataset and pedagogic research, and brings together members of ASI's Knowledge Production Project and the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative to converse with experts, educators, and faculty from industry and academia.
Awesome. In episode 3, or is this something that...
No, this is Search Files episode 3.
In episode 3, where basically Makarim and myself were co-hosting, it was titled Decolonizing Anthropology and Opening Palestine Maps. As I shared, Makarim, who is the coordinator and manager of the Middle East and Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative, and myself spoke with Ahmed Barclay and Girish Daswani, who discussed the role of open source data and mapping on Palestine studies, and what it means to decolonize anthropology, and what decolonization means to begin with, because we had this discussion as well, and how that work in general appears in the classroom.
Be sure to check out episode 3 in its entirety in our digest, again, to be published very, very soon.
And you know what? We didn't have an interlude at all.
We didn't have a single one.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go ahead.
Okay, well, that wraps up today's show.
But that was really like relaxing. Like, I relaxed.
If only we had remembered to do it the 5 other times.
I'm gonna do it
to
again.
relax us. One more time. Good measure. Saeed. All right.
Bennett is laughing. He thinks we're nuts.
Yeah, I mean...
Bennett, you're like much younger than us. You should be like enjoying this silliness.
I'm in my 20s. I'm not that much older than him. I'm still in my 20s. All right. Anyway, that wraps up today's show, covering a month of knowledge production in April. Be sure to find all the content we discussed today in the episode digest to be up on Jadaliyya in the coming days.
Thanks to you all, and thanks to our guests, and of course, again, you, the viewers. We will see you next month.
See you then.